I'm a talkative person. Because I'm an SE dom, it's like my only world is the physical. My words are the only means of me getting out my meaning and intention. We'll see if I eat those words.
Should be entertaining others all the time.
This is exactly where I wanted to go with this. I would not dare to fist bump on a podcast where people can hear me. You guys ready to go?
Yeah, keen.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Literally No Subtext podcast. I'm very excited to welcome my dear sister Jenna here. She is an ENFP. She is here to chat all things FI. Jenna, give a big howdy hello.
Howdy, hello.
Wasn't big enough.
Howdy, hello. Dance, monkey, dance.
Disclaimer, it's 11 p.m. so we are using our nighttime voices today.
That's right.
But doesn't mean this will be any less valuable. Does it?
I mean, my
we
brain's not
guaranteeing?
very sharp at the moment, so it may be less valuable. Who knows? Who's to say?
Are we guaranteeing?
Well, I mean, we're talking about values on this podcast.
Interesting.
So we'll see what the listeners decide is valuable.
No, look.
And how they go about deciding it.
No, look,
Is
the
this
aim
inherently valuable?
Okay, we're not going to do the interrupting thing. No, we are, let's be honest.
Also, our voices sound very similar. So when you're listening to this, we may or may not have applied a filter to one of our voices.
No guarantees on that one because that'll involve me working out how to do that. And I'm not sure at this point whether I have worked out how to do that at the time that you're listening. Future Kristin, dunno. It's her problem. She'll work it out. Or she won't, in which case you will have to...
Put this train back on the tracks, Kristin. Come on. Derailing.
We'll do our best to be like, oh, it's Kristin talking, everyone. Or thanks for saying that point, Jenna.
That's right.
To make it clear who's talking. But otherwise, rip. But it's kind of symbolic because we're talking about FI and, you know, that's our shared interest. So we are one voice. No.
That felt wrong.
That did feel wrong.
That one didn't feel good.
No, it didn't, to quote Cameron. So in essence, the topic of today's podcast is FI. What we're endeavouring to do in today's episode is
get my baby to sleep.
So what we're endeavouring...
It's okay. It'll just be a dull...
Couple of housekeeping points. First of all, there is a snoring baby in the background. So if you hear snoring, that's the reason it's there.
Or Kristin has said something really boring and I've fallen asleep.
Oh, come on, please. As if I would be the one.
She's a censor.
Sorry, yeah. I've literally fallen asleep while Jenna has been talking before, multiple times. We had sleepovers as kids. Anyway, second point is that we, in this podcast, are endeavouring to talk about FI or Introverted Feeling. If you'd like to know more about the cognitive functions, there is a podcast episode where I talk about them at length. So please have a look at that episode if you're interested. There's also a video on my Dear Kristin YouTube channel going into the 8 cognitive functions. Actually, there's 2 videos, so go ahead and watch those. We're not going to go into the essence of all of the cognitive functions and what they are today. We're just going to dive into FI, Introverted Feeling, and talk about how it presents for each of us, how we perceive it to be different from FE, and basically trying to get to the heart of what it is.
Also, obviously, all of these thoughts will come from our own perspective of the functions, which is important to say, and it's our own experiences.
Obviously, we're going to be speaking from our experience here. We're trying very much to give you some tangible data and just an organic conversation between 2 FI users to help you understand the function a bit better. But please take everything with a grain of salt, because please remember that FI is not guaranteed to present in certain behaviours across the board for all FI users, particular behaviours I mean. So the first question I'll ask is, what is introverted feeling and how does it differ from extroverted feeling, or FE as people call it? Jenna, thoughts?
Well, the first thing I'll say is it's important to remember that the feeling and thinking functions are what's called judging functions. So basically you take in information through your perceiving functions and then you evaluate that information through your judging functions. And this happens largely on an unconscious level. The way you use your judging functions is not conscious and deliberate in the way that people think it is. It's just your natural mode of... It's what you're naturally paying attention to, what sort of information you're naturally paying attention to in the process of making, in the case of an F realm, a value judgment. So when I say a value judgment, I mean basically you're making a judgment about what you find to be personally valuable.
I feel like we need to make the disclaimer that FI isn't values.
Definitely.
A lot of people will probably understand FI to mean that it is in and of itself values.
Which is so not what it is, because any human being will have a set of personal values that they've defined.
And we all look at our values when we're making decisions.
We're all going to look at our values. The important thing to remember with the cognitive functions is it's a unique perspective that you have. So the cognitive functions, when we talk about the judging functions, and here again, specifically the F functions, because that's what we're focusing on in this episode of the podcast, the information that you're paying attention to is largely going to be emotional and relational sort of interpersonal information. So it's basically in the process of establishing value, what are you paying attention to? And the things that FE is naturally paying attention to are going to be different from the things that FI is naturally paying attention to. And these are just things that sort of innately occur. Your attention will go one way or another, and it's not to do with what you're consciously choosing to do. The best way to kind of understand FI is in relation to FE. So I think we need to talk about FE first, so that then we can understand FI.
And I feel like it's nice to point out that when we're talking about these decision-making processes, it's not with the big decisions like, where am I going to move overseas? Or who am I going to marry? Or other decisions that you would very obviously consider lots of different perspectives. You'd ask lots of people about it. You'd think logically, and where is my head? Where is my heart with this? Where are things lining up? There are decisions that we make that are bigger, that I think a lot of people think of when they hear that Myers-Briggs is a tool for working out where you go to make your decisions. Cognitive functions don't just account for those big decisions. It's the smaller decisions, for instance.
Yeah, a lot of the problem in identifying what judging functions you're using is when you look at yourself, firstly, it's very hard to actually look at yourself in an accurate way. Secondly, you're seeing yourself with the most nuance because you are yourself and you are aware of everything that's occurring internally. So it can be hard and confusing to try and identify what you're doing. And third,
I'm sorry, Jenna just looks like an Ewok right now.
Yeah. It's like 11:30 or something. I've got it's freezing in my house where we're recording this, and I've got a blanket on and I've got a hoodie on. It's like a sheepskin looking sort of hoodie over my head, and my hair is inexplicable.
Your hair is inexplicable.
Anyway, what were we saying? Where were we?
The beauty of a podcast is I can just rewind and have a listen to what we were saying. No, you were talking about how cognitive functions are with the smaller decisions.
Oh, I was going, it was a really inconvenient place to interrupt because I was saying something about threefold, things that were threefold. Oh, and another thing that makes it difficult is that when you think about, something like, I make my decisions, then you're only thinking about decisions that you're actually aware of being made. You're not thinking about micro decisions that you're making every day, and that's actually where we see the cognitive functions more naturally and easily play out, is 100%. In those little decisions, day-to-day decisions.
Where am I going to get my coffee?
That are less deliberate.
What am I going to take, the staircase or the escalator? Am I going to...
What should I wear out of my house?
Am I actually going to listen to my sister talk today? Or am I going to go on Instagram instead?
Not from life experience. So those things are important to keep in mind. Now let's just talk about FE, extroverted feeling, for a sec, because I think we can understand FI as sort of a negation of FE in some ways,
legit.
Right? Because
Carl
Carl Jung defines it as introverted feeling as like sort of in that negative way. It's negative feeling that's opposed to the object in a sense. We won't go into that too much, but I'll just sort of just say what I want to say about FE, and then you can
say what you want to say.
You can say
that's very FI. Jenna's like, let me say what I want to say first, and then if you have anything to add, you can add. Oh my gosh,
yes. This is such a very FITE way of doing this podcast. It's like, I'll say my bit, then you say your bit.
The reason that is FI is because the first point of reference, the first thing that is being considered is the person's own.
We'll just go on with we'll just talk about FE first. So extroverted feeling.
That was a TE thing that just happened right there. Jenna was like, well, Kristin, if it's okay, this is how I'd like it to be organised.
Not if it's okay. It's okay. It's like, we will do it this way.
No, we'll just talk about FE first, Kristin, okay? Makes more sense. This is how I think it'll make more sense. This is how I judge it'll work better.
So, anyway, what was I going to say?
Let's talk about FE
that
first,
was coming.
Kristin.
Okay, yeah, okay. So what I mean is, if it's all right.
Sorry, should I just go to bed and just leave the mics on for you? No.
If it's agreeable to you, sorry, Kristin. If it's agreeable to you, I will say something about FE, and then if you want to jump in after I've said my bit, you can say what you say about FE, and then
It's
we'll
okay.
talk
I
about
just
FI.
really want you to feel comfortable in this space.
Stop it. That's so inauthentic.
I know.
Anyway,
I do want you to feel comfortable in the
thank you,
space, but I
obviously.
wouldn't say that.
Okay, so with extroverted feeling, through the process of figuring out what is personally valuable to you, you're naturally going to be essentially as a necessary part of the judging process. You're going to be taking on considering other people's values, other people's feelings to help you decide what is valuable to you. And it's important to say there's a misconception with FE that it's kind of like, well, whatever most people find valuable, I'll just find valuable. But again, we want to emphasize that every person will reach their own individually defined values. So it's not about having individually defined values. It's just in the process of reaching your own individually defined values, what are you considering? What are you paying attention to most? What is most, I don't want to say most important because that implies that you're ranking the other ways of doing things, but what just is the way you do it? What is what you pay attention to without maybe even thinking of another way of doing it,
I like
right?
that. I like that point. It's not about what's important. It's just a natural thing. What
Exactly.
You're not even
paying,
the best way to say
you're not
it.
even considering any other way of doing it. It's just how you do it. So
Yeah.
for
Good
people,
job, Jenna.
Thank you, Kristin. So for people who use extroverted, feeling, it is an essential part of the process of working out their own values to consider other people's feelings and other people's values. And then they weigh up that information. And that could be anyone. That could be people close to them. It could be one other person who's like very close to them. It could be whoever's around them immediately. It could be friends they trust. It could be the wider society. It's just an external mind or an external minds, external people, external feelings and values, external vibes. It could be a vibe of a room. It could be something like that. But this is all important and vital information in order to decide what is valuable to the individual. So that, do you want to add? That's what I would say for FE. Do you want to add anything, Kristin?
Yeah, so when something pops up, when something's been perceived and a decision needs to be made, what the person who prefers FE is going to be doing is assessing the shared value of the people around them. FI, what it is going to be doing is paying attention to its own personal. You're like, Jenna looked at me at the moment I said FI because she's like, Kristin, we haven't brought in FI yet. We were supposed to. I allowed you to talk about FE. I said, do you have anything to add about FE? I saw that in your face, the way you looked at me. Sorry, we'll just pin FI for a second because I'm sure Jenna would like to talk to you about
I just
FI.
have a very
No, fair.
SI ordered way of wanting to get through
well,
the
you know
content.
what? You're my guest. So,
That's fine.
Be our guest.
Be our guest, put your something service to the test.
Okay, we'll leave FI for a second. But yeah, what I did want to say about FE in the same way we said earlier that FI isn't just values. FE is not just caring about people. Oh, you care about people. Therefore, you use FE. And
Absolutely.
I mean, I've seen that in the type community a lot when someone's like, oh, this person is clearly using FE because they're talking about the community or loving others in some way.
They seem to really consider other people's views or opinions or things like that. Let's remember there's different realms of these cognitive functions too. So like if you're an extroverted thinking type, for example, you're going to want to consider what other people think, right? So again, let's go to the FE and just mention as well that when we're talking about the information, the input, the data that is important to consider in coming up with your own values, it's all feelings. It's expressions of feelings and value judgments. It's not thoughts. So for example, when I'm making decisions, I want to consider logical arguments, right? So that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about how another emotional experience that's outside of yourself. So if I'm an FE user and I want to decide how should I feel about something, and I'm trying to work that out for myself, and I can see that Kristin feels a certain way about the thing, that's going to be an important consideration if Kristin's someone I care about or Kristin's someone that I'm around it's going to be an important consideration to see how Kristin emotionally feels about this and what she deems personally valuable. That's going to be important information to me in some way, informing my own value judgments. But they will be my own value judgments if I'm an FE user.
And it's not that you would be saying, oh, I'm going to mimic or follow whatever Kristin feels, but I need to cite what Kristin feels in order to sort out how I feel.
That's right. So a way that I've defined it or like a little kind of phrase that I've used in talking about FE is that FE users will tend to glean a better understanding of how they feel about things if they can first explore and gauge how other people feel about things. It doesn't mean they're going to end up at the same conclusion or the same feeling that the other person has, but it just means that it's very important by necessity, in essence of the process, of the judging process, that they are considering other people's emotional input. So it's not, again, it's not philosophical, it's not logical, it's not abstract or anything like that. It's an emotional input that's important in FE, with FE.
Yeah, a classic example. I'm hoping we are going to be providing some practical examples along the way of this to not keep it too abstract. But it's certainly valuable to be able to talk about potential ways that this can happen to clarify what we mean. That's not to say that all FE users will present this exact type of behaviour. But an example is one of my friends, we recently had an election in Australia, and one of my ENFJ friends published an Instagram story where he was very openly saying, guys, this election's coming up. How do we feel about it? What are your thoughts on elections in general? Why do we feel that elections are important? Like, let's open up a conversation in my inbox. I want to know where you guys are at, in order to sort of work out how he was feeling about the election and who to vote for. He had to cite that. Whereas, just as a whereas, Jenna, would it be okay if I say whereas to talk about my FI experience in regards to this?
Of course.
For me, when I'm making that kind of decision, I need to know that people around me know that I'm going to be shutting them off in my decision-making process, because I need to go inside, do my own research, think about things for myself, work out how I personally feel about it. And it's not actually about how anyone feels in that moment to work that out for myself. It's about what's important to me actually. And okay, great, you feel that way. That literally has no impact on the decision that I'm going to make for myself. So I'm not using that necessary process of running my feelings past the group.
So to jump, that's a nice segue into FI. So by contrast, my own thoughts on FI, my introverted feeling, and the way I experience it is that with introverted feeling, if we think about how a necessary process for extroverted feeling is to go and look at how other people emotionally respond. Emotionally, again, introverted feeling, people who use or prefer introverted feeling, it just won't occur to them. It's not that they don't prioritize or appreciate other people's feelings. It just won't occur to the introverted feeler to ask or seek out other people's emotional experiences in order to determine the validity of their own emotional experience or to make their own value judgments. It's not that it's not valuable. It's just that it just doesn't occur. Like, it just does not occur to me. And I know Kristin's the same. As an FI user, when I come up against something and I'm trying to decide if it's valuable, I know pretty quickly whether it's something that I value or not, because I feel a certain way, and then I can process my own emotional experience to discover what I value or what it is that I value about those things. And that's an internal process. For me, as an introverted feeling, auxiliary type, things that will influence how I feel will be things like logical arguments, philosophical perspectives, concepts, ideas, experiences, sense experiences. All that stuff might influence how I feel about something. But the emotional experiences of others aren't a factor in what my emotional experience is going to be.
Yeah. Which is why I think it's so easy for FI users to be like, naturally, you do you, like, your experience is valid, because they're so rock solid in their emotional experience. They're not going to be, they're like, oh, I know my experience. I want you to know yours as well.
And it's not a thing like you're shutting off other people's feelings. If I'm making a decision about something I want to do or I find valuable and I feel it a certain way, then someone can come to me and say, I feel like I feel sad about your value or something like that. Let's say they express an emotion about the value that I have or something like that. I look at that and I say, oh, like, it's sad that you're feeling sad, but it doesn't change or influence the value that I've formed or how I have formed that value. It's not an important part of the process of forming a value judgment for me to consider other people's values or emotional experiences. I can see them as separate and individual to those individuals, but it's not something I'm going to be taking on board when I'm considering what is valuable to me or how I feel about things. I know pretty quickly how I feel about things, and then I know pretty quickly whether my own feelings about how I feel are like trustworthy or not. It's it's an internal process I can do without bouncing it off other people and then informing my own values. Another little thing I like to say about FI is where FE understands better how they feel by looking at other people's emotional experiences and values just by necessity. FI, introverted feeling, will get a better understanding of how other people feel and how other people value things by first looking at how they feel and how they value things. So for me, through my own emotional process, introverted feeling, judging process, and evaluating process, doing that myself gives me a better understanding then of how other people reach their values. And I have a very high tolerance for other people's values, other people's individually formed values in general, regardless of how they're forming them. But because my process is so internal, and so I trust my own process in coming to value judgments. It's that classic thing of you kind of see what you do, you kind of project onto other people in a certain way. I think it's like what you said before of the you do you thing, even though both of us are like, you do you is a stupid phrase in general, but like,
naturally,
but
we
that
want to
vibe
do that,
of like, okay, I have come to my values, and I trust that if you've come to a value, you kind of know why it's important to you.
And good on you.
I just assume that it's that you understand why that's important to you, and like, I respect that you have your own values and I have my own values. I'm not trying to like change your values.
I've just had a realization, which is digressing a bit to TI, but it's the same thing with the ENTP debater stereotype, how everyone wrongfully thinks that they debate because they want to change people's minds. It's more like the you do you thing, but with TI. So it's like, I just want to make sure that I just want to hear your logical arguments for why you got where you were. It's not for the sake of like changing the person's logical argument. It's just like, oh, I just want to see that you also have that, and you have that. You have your own ways of you have your own TI. Yeah. Good on you.
I mean, it's also kind of, as I've said that, it's also kind of naive to say that you're never going to try and change other people's values, because I think we all try to do that in many ways. Like, an ENTP would definitely be trying to change people's reasons or logical, and we all want people to come onto our side with certain things. I think that's fine to acknowledge. That's a very human thing, and it would be kind of bad if we didn't do that, because it would mean we don't care about how other people live. But I think it's just, you kind of, it's not something that I feel like I need to be generally kind of imposing on other people, my own value system.
No,
not that FE users are always doing that, but I think sometimes there's more of an extroverted. It's more collaborative in its nature, in the same way that extroverted thinking is collaborative in its nature, in a certain sense. Collaborative in the sense of, we can all see this thing that's obvious, let's discuss it, or we can all see the same facts and data, so what are we doing with that? FE is kind of like, well, we all have feelings about these things, so let's figure out what to do with that information to find a correct or appropriate way of feeling about things. Because I think I'm not an FE user, so I can't say if FE users are trying to suspend judgment by virtue of it being an extroverted function.
I feel like another thing people commonly misunderstand as FE is that they want harmony at all costs. It's like, FE values harmony. And again, we're looking at values here. We all have different values. We probably all value harmony in some way. FE at its core is not valuing harmony. FI can also value harmony if it decides that harmony is important to it. The maintaining of harmony is probably a subconscious effect of that decision-making process, because they are trying to make that decision based on the consensus, as Jenna has just said. To be clear, that was Jenna talking that entire time. And in the same way, FI, just by the virtue of the fact that it's using TE, will sometimes forego harmony for the sake of expressing one's own values or feelings about something. So it's kind of like an accidental, but it's not the essence of what FE and FI are, whether there's harmony or isn't harmony, because I value harmony as a person, and I've become really good at being...
I think you just become naturally better at social harmony when you are interested in finding out what other people think is valuable, because you're going to be going around trying to find out what other people think is valuable.
Yeah.
Which is going to be harmonious experience, and you're probably going to enjoy doing that too.
And like when I was young, naturally, I think, I sometimes disrupted harmony sometimes on whims of whatever FI rant I wanted to go on. But now as I've grown, I actually sometimes will feel an FI feeling surge up within me that I want to verbalize. And then I might be like, actually, no, I'm aware that this is FI. I'm going to take a moment to kind of employ the coping strategies I have for kind of putting the emotion aside for now and listening to the person, whatever the argument they're trying to put forward, seeing them in this moment, because I value harmony and because I want us to have a good relationship. So people might look at me and be like, oh, she values harmony, therefore she uses FE. It's like, no, it can be sometimes hard to maintain harmony when you have something happen in a social context that clashes with your FI, personal emotional experience.
It's also worth mentioning that because the introverted functions are more subjective, and they're more, I call them more high stakes, because you're more attached to them, personally attached to them in a certain sense. So in the same way with introverted thinkers have built a system of an internally structured system of premises, principles, logically consistent rules and protocols from which they act. Nothing will get put into that system that they haven't rigorously tested and falsified and believed to be absolutely true. So if someone comes up and kind of says, hey, this false claim or something like that, then the TI, the person who uses the TI, might, if in a context where they're having a discussion with that person, might feel the need to defend the TI, like the logic, or explain why that is wrong or false or incorrect, in the same way that the introverted feeler is, their internal framework is, it's a very emotions based. Sometimes you're very emotionally attached to certain things, certain ideas, and it might not have a logical basis to it. It's just you feel something strongly, you know it's valuable to you, but you might not be able to explain why.
Yeah, I think often it wouldn't have a logical basis to it.
Often, always, no.
Yeah.
Most of the time, forever.
Yeah. You have it, and then you're like, oh, I should find a logical basis
That's right.
for this, just
so
I
it can feel
defend it
inexplicably. You can feel an inexplicable need to defend sometimes an FI value if you have a circumstance where something external is in opposition to whatever the FI value is in that present moment. So whatever the thing is that you're emotionally attached to. And I think it's worth mentioning as well that extroverted feelers, because the function, their internal framework is always a TI framework. It's not an F internal framework. It's a T framework. The F is more, this is the wrong sort of language, or not precise really, but they can sort of afford to be, it's not as high, the feelings is not, they can afford to outsource the feeling stuff.
Yeah, it's not personal.
It's less personal, more collective, more collaborative in that way that we've discussed.
Yeah, FI
whereas
is
the
so
same
much
with,
more high stakes for the subject.
Like the FI will outsource the TE in many ways, in a similar sort of way.
I mean, yeah, that this what we've been talking about just now it literally happened a few nights ago. I got into a conversation with one of my friends where we just, by nature, we have really real blunt conversations with each other, and she hit on a particularly poignant FI emotional experience of mine in just the wrong way that made me want to defend my own feeling about something. And I realized what was happening because of my knowledge of MBTI myself, and I was able to be like, okay, let's put it aside. The emotion was still happening, but I think I handled it in a way that was I just wouldn't have handled it that way if I didn't have knowledge that my T function was lower than my F function, which I think is one of the greatest thing about things about learning about the functions, you're like, okay, because I use FI second, I'm able to be like, that's going to hit first. It's going to hit before the T. And so taking that moment to be like, okay, I'm going to validate the feeling within myself. I feel great about that. I know this is something that's personal to me. That doesn't mean what this person is saying right now is less valid or valuable to me. And I trust that what she's saying is good for the friendship and because she loves me. So I was able to take a moment to sort of push the FI down for a little bit. And then we discussed it a little bit later. So it's not like I was suppressing or anything. But it was because I was valuing the harmony between me and my friend that is something that I did, right? And because I care about harmony and people. So if you see that behavior in someone, doesn't mean that they're using FE. That's why it's important to mention it's not harmony.
Well, also cognitive functions are not behaviors. And this is something that I've said lots of times in other places. Not that people are ever paying attention to what I'm saying, but
Please.
But
ENFP
the thing is, like,
security coming out there.
But what I mean is, like, in my conversations with my cat, I've said, just kidding, I don't have cats. But in my conversations in my head, this is what I'm saying to myself. Anyway, no, but it's very important to remember that cognitive functions are not behaviors. They're literally they're best understood as just a perspective, a unique perspective that you have when you look at the world. A unique lens
glasses
through which you see the world. And that's all. So the FE is just the process of making judgments. And you're in the process of making judgments. If you're an F of any kind, you're in the process of making value judgments, probably a lot during your day-to-day life, without realizing it. Micro value judgments on an emotional level. When we're talking about in this podcast, when we talk about things being valuable, we're not talking about ideologically valuable or whatever. We're just talking about valuable on an emotions, feelings level, like in an affective sort of way. So it's all about just the process. The behaviors are the accidentals to the process, but obviously if you think in a certain way, you're likely to behave in a generally predictable way, but it can look like lots of different things. Another misconception about FE is kind of like, oh, it's good at reading the room. I think that comes from the fact that people who are using FE as one of their first two functions, because they are trying to, like, they're really trying to find out how other people feel and what other people feel to be emotionally valuable in that way that I just talked about. Because they're doing that, it just makes sense that they're going to be focused on the vibe of the room, because that's largely, like, the emotional climate of the room will kind of tell them what's valuable in that context. So they're going to be switched on to that. But that's a result of
accidental.
That's a result of or an effect of the cognitive process. That's not the cognitive process itself. So,
because FI users absolutely can also be very good at reading a room.
And the problem is, anytime you define a cognitive function by a behavior, then it loses explanatory value, because anyone could have those behaviors. Anyone can do any behavior, and it's not necessarily a specific behavior is not necessarily evidence of one cognitive function over another. There are many things that can affect or impact people's behaviors. So, and also people are unique individuals, obviously, and they express their cognitive preferences in different ways. But there are general patterns, and it's important to note that, and that's why type exists, is because there are general patterns. But it's best to understand them as general patterns, right? Okay, that being said, should we get into some specific examples of how maybe we use...
Jenna's TE is so clear. It's not even funny. There's not even a moment, like, the FITE access is so clear in this interview. Like, there's not even a moment where you're just like, what are your thoughts on that, Kristin? Or like this. It's like, okay, with that being said...
Well, because I know, the thing is, I know you're an FITE as well, and I know you very well, and I know that you'll jump in when you have things to say.
Yeah,
and because it's you, look, this is not the way I would
do
act
struggle very
anyone.
hard to jump in, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm not naturally a jump innerer because of my NI that wants to finish its thought and wants others to finish its thought as well. But yes, I did want to say something which I've forgotten now, but I will remember it. Yeah, so all that to say, now we have been recording for 53 minutes. Not sure if we've cut it down, hoping we've cut it down. Perhaps it's shorter than that, hopefully. But all that to say, when you're making a decision, is it a factor at all in those little micro decisions, the shared value of the group or not in terms of feelings? is that something you naturally consider in making your own decision, or is it something that you might as well be, that you feel blind to? It has little to no impact in the decision that you're making for yourself.
And by that decision, we mean, again, specifically to emphasize that we mean, how do I feel about this thing that I'm considering? Like when you're like, oh, how do I feel about this? How do I feel about this?
Yeah, good clarification.
Do you know that's
Within
the decision? The
essence of
decision
your
you're making
soul.
is the decision you're making is deciding how you feel about something, basically, and whether it's valuable.
Yeah, 100%.
On a feelings level. So when you're thinking, how do I feel about this? For me, I'm always just thinking, how do I feel about this? Well, what do I know about it? And I might start going to things that aren't other people's feelings, basically.
Yeah, like what works? What's going to be beneficial for XYZ?
It's usually the TE reasons that I'm kind of thinking about, or the functions, right? Like functionality, not cognitive functions.
Yeah.
Anyway,
an example is when...
If you think about... Sorry, please go on.
Yeah, an example of where this was relevant is when all the COVID vaccine stuff was coming up, and I was trying to decide how I felt about it, and it wasn't necessarily... I mean, it was going to therefore be a result. It was going to result in a decision of what to do about it, but how I felt about all of these, different opinions that were coming up, all of these different sides. Obviously, there were people in my life who felt really differently about the vaccine, and I was trying to just decide how I felt about it, what was sitting well with me within myself. And there were people in my life who were on opposite sides of the spectrum who were trying to, I guess, tell me how they felt about it from a values perspective. And I just was like, I'm sorry, like that just doesn't matter to me. I didn't say that. I mean, I did sometimes to some of them. But what I was considering is, what I was interested in is whether or not these people could provide me with facts, credible sources of things that I could cite or look into to be able to make my decision. Anecdotes, stories that were relevant. It wasn't the person I was talking to's feelings or whether what fit into their value system in that moment. It was like, how can you give me something that's actually going to help me to decide whether this is something I should do on a functional level? How they were feeling about it wasn't relevant to my decision-making process. I basically just needed to shut them out, do my own sort of looking into it in order to work out where I sat on a feelings level. And then over time, after doing my own sort of digging, my own thinking about it, having shut out literally all of the voices around me, I was able to work out how I felt about it. But I wasn't... If someone was coming forward to me to say how they felt about the issue, I'm just going to say this bluntly, it was not a factor in working out how I felt about it. I was like, okay, great, you know where you sit on this. That's great for you. I don't know where I sit on this, so I'd appreciate if you let me decide for myself. In fact, I actually said that in some of my relationships, which is a classic FI tell.
Yeah, another example that comes to mind is when Kristin... Thanks, Kristin. Another example that comes to mind is when Kristin decided that she wanted to move overseas.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like, this was like almost stereotypically like FI. When Kristin decided she wanted to move overseas, and some FE people, shall we say, the vibe was, oh, I'm sad about this. Are you going to consider the fact that I'll be sad if you go away, kind of thing? And
I wanted to consider that.
Yeah, it's like it's not that you don't care that they're sad. It's just that when you're making that decision, you know on some fundamental level that it's really important for you to do.
I was literally like, I know where I sit on this. Nothing is going to change my mind on this. I know it's an important thing I have to do. I've made up my mind a long time ago about how I feel. It feels right on many levels. And when I was sitting with those people and chatting to them, I validated their feeling and I assured them that I would be in contact and that that their feelings were important to me. But which is the truth, their feelings were and are important to me in any capacity, and they are valid. I see them as valid. But within myself, when those people were telling me about their feelings, that wasn't a factor in me making a decision whatsoever.
Yeah, now, if I had you could consider other things that weren't their emotional expressions in an expressivistic kind of way.
Yeah.
Like them saying boo-hoo, crying would not be a factor, but them maybe saying, oh, have you considered this reason that you shouldn't go
Yeah,
based
like
on
maybe you
what
don't
I've
have
read
enough
about
money,
this country,
or what I've read, or
the practical considerations, whatever, which you also didn't.
Yeah.
You're also like, yes, I have
not.
no money, but I'm still going to do
Yeah,
it.
I literally was like, I have no money and I'm doing no research. This just feels right. Which is
I
just
was like, what are
very
you doing?
FI. Very FI, Dom. And
But
especially
I
SE,
also, as
FI.
well, I'm just thinking about my own, like, as an FI user, when you did that, I was like, well, it's something she's got to do, clearly. Like,
Yeah.
I was sad you were going, but I was also like, I'm not going to stand in the way of this
Yeah.
FI design. Like,
And I was I felt sad that people in my life felt sad. I did. I was like, that really sucks. But that literally doesn't change the fact that this is something I know I have to do.
yeah,
for
and
myself.
if you had stayed and not made that decision to go, you would be
There
at
would have
war
been
inside.
regret.
Like,
Yeah,
you would have
yeah,
been
100%.
inside yourself. You would have been in turmoil of like, I'm wasting my life. I'm not doing this important thing I'm feeling like I need to do.
Now that's not saying that I will always be that way and would have made that same decision. Like with that,
It's just
particular-
an
if I had like
example.
a family, for instance, I wouldn't just be
Sure,
like,
I mean,
I've got to move overseas. Understand this.
That's an example. That's one
Of
specific
me in my
example.
youth when I could
and
do
it's
things
also
like that.
a
My youth, I could still do that.
It's literally
I'm
just to
currently
illustrate-
still considering doing that again.
It's literally just to illustrate the function as well. In that, and again, that is more of a kind of like big notable life decision. But yeah, I want to talk a little bit about some of the smaller decisions, because I've noticed, we were talking in the car before about how I've noticed with some particular flavor of FE that people of this particular type of FE, I guess, would do things like before leaving the house kind of ask, do I look okay? Does this outfit, what do you think of what do you think of my outfit, kind of thing? Which I was just saying before in the car is just, I mean, this could be for a variety of reasons that people are doing this, but the way that there's two particular people who used to do this, both FE users, and it was kind of like will this be contextually appropriate for the social thing I'm going to, or situationally appropriate for whatever thing? Like, is this the correct sort of ballpark of dress or attire that I'm wearing, kind of vibe? And I thought that was interesting in just getting perspective from another person. Like, I don't know how to feel about my own outfit. I need input from other people about how to feel about my own outfit. Whereas for me, it would just never occur to me to ask someone, how should I feel about the thing I'm wearing? If I've put it on, I know that I want to wear it and I feel like I should wear it. I've noticed
that TEs do that as well. It could be a J thing because I mean, my ISTJ ex-housemate doesn't live with me anymore. She would often come and be like, is this fine for work? Or is this something, what does this outfit say? Or is this okay for this occasion? But that might have been an SI thing. I'm not sure.
It might not have been on an emotional level. How should I feel about what I'm wearing?
It was never
because
a
I
should
think
I feel.
with the FE, the specific FE flavor, it's like, I don't know if I feel like, in order to feel emotionally confident about what I'm wearing, I need someone to tell me, I think it's good, or I think something. I think I feel great about your outfit, or something like that. I could be getting this completely wrong. And again, this is a particular behavior, so it could be a bunch of things that are affecting, and I'm sure there are a bunch of things that affect someone asking, and I'm sure FI users would ask that too.
I've asked that kind of question a few times. Yeah, I've asked that a few times when I'm going on something like a date, where it's a little bit higher stakes. Yeah, a date. If I really am invested in it or something.
This might just be a me thing. I just never.
No, I mean, to be clear, I rarely ask. I'm only thinking of a few times where I have asked when it was something I was really invested in or overthinking. But then again, I think, as you said, it was pointing to probably an insecurity of mine for a few reasons. I think it could be just a P thing to not care about that.
Yeah. But it could be a P thing.
Again, if you're a P, you're not using FE as any of your first
It's probably
functions.
an individual thing too. Like, it's probably more of a comes down to individuals. Lots of things.
Well, I think we could say a J, which means you're using an extroverted judging function as one of your first two functions, would do those check-ins because of the shoulds that they are striving towards. Like, they believe that things should be types of ways. I'm dressing like this for the outcome of this, right? So they would want to check in based on how should I feel about this, or how does this outfit work for functionality's sake or for the workplace, or does it give this message? Help me to, like for my ISTJX housemate, her blind FE was probably a reason why she was doing it. Like, I can't tell what this message that this outfit is giving. Help me work that out.
Yep.
But again, because it's an outcomes based thing, I think for P's we're like, oh, the outcome doesn't matter. It's about the process, and therefore what's going to make us feel comfortable. And especially with FI, which is a good segue into this whole thing that I find particularly annoying about FI, is because we are deciding how we feel about things based on our own personal individual experience most of the time. If we don't feel like doing something,
oh my god,
like,
kill me now.
Oh gosh, it's so hard to convince us to do it or to get us to do it. It's like, no, like I don't feel like doing this thing today. I know I should do this thing, or I know I told myself I was going to make this rule for myself in terms of being self-disciplined enough to get up and exercise at 6 a.m, but I don't feel like it. And because you're not citing other people to decide how you feel about things, it's well and good enough for you to not feel like it, to convince yourself to feel good about sleeping in and not doing it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are good. There's a lot of external sources that are good for nipping that in the bud.
Yeah.
Have children.
Have some self-respect. No.
Have some discipline. No, like if you have a family, you can't afford to just go like on what you feel like doing, which is good
for sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good way to live, to just do whatever you feel like doing without recourse to other people. I think it's silly.
Yeah,
but it's also something I had to learn. It's also something I had to learn. It's not an innate thing.
Because something I've been kind of learning recently is that I lived a lot of my life based on the ebbs and flows of my feelings, without citing, like moving overseas, deciding to not use my degree because I suddenly felt like I wasn't interested in that anymore, and I felt like I wanted to pursue this other area, and doing that multiple times. And now I'm kind of getting to a point where I'm like, making decisions just based on my heart isn't actually fulfilling, and I kind of feel like I'm not building any skills or self-discipline.
I can deceive myself very easily.
Yeah,
100%,
surprise. 100%.
Wow, the feelings I feel in the current moment, in the present moment, aren't actually consistent with my bigger, broader FI values a lot of the time. So that's the thing, is like, yes, you're subject, Fs probably in general are subject to their feelings in making decisions a lot of the time anyway, but I think FI is also like a good thing about having very strong, it's not really an FI thing. Anyone can have strong values, internal values. But a lot of the time, if you are solely responsible for feeling a certain way about whether something's valuable or not, I think that can carry you a lot to pursue things that are important when other people are saying that it's stupid, or giving you negative emotional feedback.
Oh yeah, like you're thinking of Moana, aren't you?
Yeah, I am now. Moana, but clear ESFP.
And this is like, it's just...
Oh man, I could talk about that movie in terms
example.
of FI.
No, I'd love for you to actually give a bit of a spiel on that. But I think before you do, I think Moana, just to say before Jenna goes into it, is a great example of how FI has its particular value for functionality, classic TE thing to say, functionality and flourishing of a group.
Well, we just say in the human, I just think of it in the human ecosystem, right? Yeah. Because
sure.
every single type of person, every single type of person has just like irreplaceable value in the human ecosystem. If you think about like Moana, for example, she's an ESFP. She's clearly from a very young age, she's drawn to the sea, not because of anything it can offer, except for the unknown. It's the unknown that she's drawn to. The exploring of the unknown she will discover when she embarks. And she doesn't fully understand why she needs to do this thing, but she knows she needs to do it, which is very FI. So it's
relatable.
Yeah. So, but then while she chooses, her parents are very, especially her dad, are very adamant that she not go and explore in the sea because they're worried for her safety, which is so fair as a parent. So she stays on the island, and she's happy to continue to performing her duty because that's also important to her, and she also cares about her family. It's not that she does not care about her family, but there's this calling on her heart. She knows it's there, and she can't resist it in many ways. She tries to resist it, but when she's resisting it, it's she's feeling very tumultuous inside, we could say. Anyway, so she perseveres in staying on the island, and it's only when her grandmother dies and kind of says, you have to go because the island is like dying, basically, that she then decides, okay, I'm actually going to do this. I know it's going to hurt my family or whatever, but I have to go do it. And she embarks on this journey that's really difficult in many ways, and what keeps her going is her own conviction in this mission that she is accomplishing, where no one else believed that it was important, but she believes without really knowing why, but she just believes. She's heart convicted that this is something she needs to do, and that conviction is what fuels her on in spite of all the hardship that she faces. And the fact that she's successful means that literally everything changes. Like, she saves the day in the movie, right? And then she has that iconic "I am Moana."
Oh, such
like
a
all
banger of a
that
song.
wole song is like such an FI
That
song.
song like made me
It's
cry
like,
the first
here's
10
who I
times
am.
I
This is
watched
my
it,
identity.
and still kind of does.
Yeah, this is who
I'm
I
like,
am. And it's like, the
relatable,
call
this
isn't
speaks to
out
myself.
there at all. It's inside me.
literally.
And I'm like, FI. That is so introverted feeling. But yeah, like, even like, it's like the tide always falling and rising. Like, you know, it's like everything is inside.
And even that song she sings to old mate at the end. Who's the old mate? What's his name? Take her.
Tafiti. Yeah.
And she's like,
Take her.
but this does not define you. This is not who you are.
Yeah. You know
Who you are. Yeah. I'm
You
like,
truly are. And I'm like, stop it with all this FI.
you know who you
Not
are.
stop it, because I love it.
Yeah.
But also,
and that just hits
yeah.
on the FI journey of just like, yeah, I feel like this is something you and when you just see this beauty and this like sense of just uniqueness and just some gift that someone has, you just want to affirm them in it and be like, this is who you are, and
yes,
it's beautiful. Like, it's
the
so
uniqueness
beautiful.
of every single person that is
100%.
unrepeatable. And yeah, we talk about type, but let's not fall into the error of thinking that type means that you are the same as someone else. You're
100%.
still, and even that type is who you are, because you're not. I mean, that's a podcast
This is
for
not
another
who
day.
you are.
But type is just like ENFP, ESFP. It's just ideas. They're just concepts that help you understand something about yourself. But that's not actually you. It's
This
an
is
abstract
not
thing.
who you are. I'm gonna make
You
that the new.
know who you are, or maybe you don't know who you are, and that's why you're looking at type. Probably
Oh my
some
gosh,
people
yeah,
here
actually.
confused, being like, I don't know if I'm FE or FI.
Yeah, that just wanting to affirm people in that. And that's the thing, like an FI can go nuts with someone about how beautiful they are, and it can be wrongly perceived as FE.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure.
Just being like this desire to, I think as an ENFP, it's different from ESFP probably, but the most rewarding thing for me in life is to just like dive as deep as I possibly can into an individual, like get to the most raw, essential core soul of that person, and just like discover that place, which you can't do with everyone because it's not prudent to do so. But like, that's like my deepest yearning is to just
I feel that at
uncover
a
the
deep
soul of
level.
another person.
100%.
And just, I think FI is very, just really appreciates individual souls on a journey. I think that sounds so cheesy and platitudinous,
Which
but
is
it's
why
like,
FI DOMs have the stereotype of being the artist, I think, is because they're constantly exploring that inner journey and wanting to bring it out into life somehow and express it somehow.
yeah, it's also the
And
world is coloured with emotionality in a way. I mean, if you're F type, it's going to be it's going to be the case anyway.
But even just like what we were saying about, even just your example about people asking for other people's opinions before they go out of what they're wearing, opinions of what they're wearing before they go out.
feeling specifically, other
Yeah,
people,
how
you feel about
how you feel about how the group feels about what that person is wearing to help work out how they feel about what they're wearing. I can see where the stereotype comes from of FI DOMs dressing in that quirky way as well. Like, you know how ENFPs and INFPs and ISFPs...
Do I know how?
Look who you're talking to. I'm talking to someone who just cuts her hair on whims and dyes her hair on whims.
Oh, I think if we're talking about FI, we need to talk about whims.
Yeah, for sure. Let's pin that for a second. But yeah, because you're not relying on anyone else's emotional experience to determine what you're feeling about something, it is about self-expression, and you are going to dress in that quirky way because it doesn't matter how other people feel about what you're wearing.
Absolutely.
At all.
Yeah.
And it's the same with art as well. Like, I'm going to put this art out there, and it doesn't matter how other people feel about it because it's presenting what I feel about this intensely rich emotional experience or journey I've been on.
Okay, so when you say that, I just have to add a disclaimer that obviously artists who are putting work out are going to care about how other people feel about it, especially professional artists, people who are creating something in order for that thing to be measured successful or whatever. People are going to be interested in other people's emotional experience of the art they've created. But what it doesn't do is invalidate whatever emotional journey the artist has been on themselves in creating that piece. So when it goes out into the world, it kind of has a life of its own, and you want people to have an emotional response to it, and you want to know what that is, but it's more like as a experience of that art piece that kind of takes on its own life. It doesn't kind of change your own experience in producing.
And in the creating of that art, you wouldn't have been considering how other people are going to feel about the art.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, this is a very general statement. But
yeah, it's general. Of
like
course, on a human level, you're like, oh, how will this be received by the world? But when you're immersed fully in the creation of art itself, just as at its core, taking away all those factors of, and I'm going to sell it later and try and get people to hire me for, or whatever it is.
If we think about art in the same way as
which, I mean, I can
FI.
see, what I'm saying is I can see why FI DOMs get the artist stereotype.
Right. Yeah, because I mean the way you're managing your feelings is kind of like how an artist is kind of creating a work. It's a unique emotional journey, creating a piece of art. And it's the same when you're kind of creating your own value system, in a sense. And other people are going to have things to say about it, but it doesn't change the way that you've made that decision about what's valuable, and also how valuable it then remains to you, just based on other people's emotional experiences. Again, I've clarified this a few times already, but I really have to stress this because people will. It's an important distinction that people miss a lot of the time. They're like, well, does that mean you're not actually considering anything people say when you're making your decisions about what's valuable? I'm like, no, I am considering a lot of things people are saying. One of them is not. It's just that what I'm not thinking to consider is how other people. It would be counterproductive to think about how other people feel emotionally. It wouldn't make sense. It would be against the process that I naturally do.
Yeah.
To think about other people. And the thing is, you can, as you get older and mature in things, or if you decide it's important to think about how other people feel, then you will do that, like we both do.
Yeah, I definitely do.
Baby crying in the background.
Baby has awoken.
Yeah.
Well, guys, unfortunately, I am sad to report that we lost the rest of the audio for this podcast episode due to my incompetence at GarageBand. And hey, before you judge me, do not underestimate how hard GarageBand is to operate. Okay, you all know that that's not true. But worry not, as it was mostly just Jenna and I giving some more examples of FI and singing some more Moana. So really, you didn't miss too much. Regardless, this was a lot of fun, so thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed our 11 p.m. voices. Did you like them? Maybe we'll do more episodes like this. Who knows? Maybe 11 p.m. is a good time for the imagination. Maybe we'll have some smooth jazz playing in the background. No guarantees there. Please don't request that. If you like this episode, please consider following the podcast, and if you're on a podcast platform that allows ratings, I'd greatly appreciate if you could leave us a rating asking for more live Moana singing. No, just kidding, but please do leave us a rating. If you're interested in checking out more MBTI content, please head over to my YouTube channel, Dear Kristin, or my Instagram page, dear.kristin. That's Kristin. If you'd like to see some of my favourite comments from YouTube, and if you'd like to participate in my type trend polls. Until next time, guys, have a wonderful day.